Now, the building behind me here in Manchester will soon reopen as the National Football Museum, celebrating all that's great in the game. And given the North West footballing prowess, it's a fitting location. But two of the region's most successful teams have recently been at the forefront of controversy over racism in football, something which threatens to turn the beautiful game into something more ugly. JC Normand reports.
Last October, two of the North West's biggest football clubs, Liverpool and Manchester United, squared up for their annual fixture at Anfield. The game was marred by an incident involving Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra. What happened in that game has sent shockwaves around the country and the world. United's Patrice Evra accused Liverpool's Luis Suarez of racially abusing him during the game. Suarez was found guilty by an independent FA inquiry, banned for 8 games and fined £40,000. The club caused further controversy after Suarez and his teammates wore T-shirts showing their support.
This weekend, Liverpool again played Manchester United, this time as part of the FA Cup.
After the game, a 58-year-old man was arrested and later released on bail for allegedly making a racist gesture. To get a historical perspective on racism in football, I spoke to Rogan Taylor from the University of Liverpool.
I think it's important for people perhaps who weren't alive 25 years ago, and for those who've forgotten, just how bad it was, how commonplace, how everyday insults for people, or for black people in particular, graffiti on walls, chants at football grounds, John Barnes having a banana lobbed at him while he's taking a corner, which he disdainfully backheeled away with that skillful touch that he was renowned for. It's hard perhaps for people today to either recall or imagine what it was like.
The National Front was mounting the first of a series of controversial marches, most of them ending with clashes with anti-racist demonstrators.
For someone who's never been subject to racial prejudice or racial hatred or racial insults, and let's face it, that's 90-odd% of the people in this country, it's almost impossible to know how bad it can be to be insulted on those grounds, to understand how stabbingly painful it can be. And I just think that means it behoves us to be extraordinarily careful in the way that we speak with people of other races and other colours.
One player to suffer racist abuse in the 1980s was John Barnes. I asked him if racism was still as widespread today.
Happens everywhere, not just in Liverpool. Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, if you go to any, it's a reflection on society. So if you've got 40,000 people, 50,000 people, it goes on. Just because it's not reported doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Do you think we're seeing racism rise again as an issue?
The racism I'm interested in is everyday racism. Stephen Lawrence, everyday racism, whereby people walking down the street, people going into shops, racism you can't prove, silent racism, unconscious racism that happens all over. That's the racism we have to get rid of. So it's fine to highlight this particular incident and say that, as long as we come down hard on Suarez, we pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, aren't we great because we're getting rid of racism. It exists everywhere.
How bad was it in the 70s and 80s? And do you think players have just as hard a time?
Well, nowhere near as hard a time, because back then, you were told to get on with it. It makes you got a chip on your shoulder if you spoke against it. So,
do you think the clubs are doing enough?
Clubs can't do anything to combat racism. Until we're going to be intellectually equal, we'll never be equal. So the very fact that Patrick Vieira is an ambassador for Manchester City, or that the best players at some clubs are black, how is that going to get rid of racism? What it'll say is that, yeah, we like black players at our club, but we would like to live next to black people, or we would like our daughter to marry a black man, or do we consider them to be intellectually equal to us because of Patrick Vieira being a good footballer? Not at all, and that's the only way we're going to get rid of racism.
So, what responsibilities do the players have? I spoke to Clark Carlisle, Preston player and chairman of the Professional Footballers Association.
As an industry, football being our national game, we want to set the benchmark. We want to be the leaders in areas of total inclusion and of making sure that every section of society feels as though they can be part of our national game and that they are involved within our national game and they are welcome.
Is there a case where ignorance, in your opinion, can ever be used as an excuse?
if a player comes from a nation or a culture where certain language that is used is deemed acceptable or is commonplace, then you can understand their using of that, but our levels of acceptability aren't the same. And therefore, the onus is on us as a union and on football clubs to make sure that players coming from different cultures are aware of the standards and levels of acceptable behaviour and language that are in use within our game.
Have you ever had anything said to you, or have you heard anything?
I've heard racial abuse. I've heard of other players who've been either racially abused by fans or by other players. It's very easy to get complacent, and we've been diversifying a lot of our attention onto homophobia, Islamophobia, sexism, all areas of discrimination. And I think a lot of people thought that actual racism, as you know, one section of discrimination has been put to the wayside. Well, it hasn't. You know, our anti-racism campaigns are still there front and centre, but we are broadening our spectrum into all forms of discrimination, because we believe that none of it should exist within our society, and most definitely not within our game.
Fortunately, there are organisations helping to make this happen. I joined ex-professional Earl Barrett for a training session with the Abram Moss Warriors.
These guys and girls are learning without somebody saying, do this, do that. And they don't know they're learning probably, but they're mixing with other groups, other nationalities, other genders, and because of that, they're actually learning about each other, learn about how to interact with each other, how to interact with different people from different communities, different religions. So I think that's important.
Would you say that racism's on the increase, or is it just that stories like the Suarez incident have put it back on the agenda?
Let's not really get stuck on an incident or a few instances. Yeah, they're happening, but it's important to know that we've come a long way, which is really, really positive. And ultimately, we want to play football. There's a lack of black managers in the game, lack of British Asian players in the game as well, so we need to work around that as well and encourage these people or these groups to get more involved in the game so that they can develop and move forward.
With kids growing up, be they black, white, Chinese, Indian, they are now forming a new British culture based on a cultural identity whereby people will identify with each other based on similarities, not colour similarities, cultural similarities. Well, only through education can we get rid of racism.
Teaches everyone that everybody's equal and we shouldn't treat anybody different and everything.
Well, you got to have the right attitude, and like you can't be like going in with dirty fouls and everything, and just no bad comments or anything about the players.
It's not just about scoring goals, it's like about sportsmanship and how good you are treating people.
When you get face-to-face contact and communication with someone of a different culture or of a different faith, that's when you really learn about how people think, and that's when you really come to realise that we are just human beings one to another.
This weekend, Luis Suarez returns after his 8-match ban. In his absence, racism has dominated the back pages. What's clear is that racism is still very much a part of English football. But hopefully, with campaigns like Kick It Out, by the time these young players reach the Premiership, it will become a thing of the past.
Well, yeah, because one day you don't want to be like racist everywhere you go. You just need to have like a peaceful world.